we ready to start?
Recording in progress. I think we
Okay.
are.
What do we
Awesome.
start with?
So I just kind of had a brief or agenda outline that we could go
Perfect.
through. Funding, treatment plan design update, and then I just left, time open for questions, whatever.
Not that we won't ask them.
So first item for the funding update, last meeting was when I think it was last meeting, we announced that we didn't make the intended use plan for SRF.
For sure.
4 points short.
Right, so we resubmitted a new application and looked at different ways to get points. We added more like biological sampling data. We looked at adding solar panels, making the building LEED certified, things like that to get extra points. And they just released the final IUB today, but they told us over the phone that we received the additional points that we requested. They didn't give us an actual total, but I noticed they didn't actually
They didn't
update
add
the
them,
total
no.
on the sheet.
I noticed that too.
If we received all of them, we would have been first on the list, but
They want to be careful with others, yeah.
Wow,
No, that's
okay, well, that's interesting.
so now
But we're not on that list.
we are on the list.
In the money
Above the cut line.
We're on the list and we're funded.
We're above the cut line.
That's correct.
for 50K.
And that just came out like
Yeah.
literally about half an hour ago.
Right.
Wow, hot off the press.
But the document that they sent says that it says we're funding the new programs and existing multi-year programs as multi-year unless next year we don't have the money.
So they're giving themselves an out.
Yeah.
Sort of.
But it's infuriating, like either you are or you aren't.
So is that?
Well, I think it just speaks to the massive uncertainty
Yes,
of the funding process.
Is that true for the people who have been granted a multi-year
if
program?
you've been granted a multi-year, then you're still on the multi-year list, and they have a separate list, they have a new list and a multi-year list.
People
We're on
that have
the-
already had projects that are started, and this is like
Right.
year 2 or 3 or 4.
Right,
And they're gonna get it all, because I mean,
I didn't.
they're going halfway through the project and all of a sudden they cut the funds off.
yeah, I
That
read
wouldn't
it,
work too well.
I read it.
You don't build half a plant and you stop, right?
Hold on
That
one
doesn't
second,
make sense,
Richard.
although you never know.
What you just said, I think they are guaranteeing if we're on this list as a prior project or a new project in this list, that they will continue to support these carryover project commitments for projects programmed. So it's saying that we've got continued funding, we obviously gotta clarify that, but
Right,
that's seems to say what it says. It said-
Jackie, what did you say besides solar panels? I'm just curious, what else did we add in?
Making the building LEED certified.
Next.
Like-
Oh, that's that designation,
Yeah.
So we got the rollover project.
So all the points were related to the plant, not the collection system. Right? The point increases were related to the plant.
Correct.
And that was more us trying to get as many points as possible, if it meant getting funding or not, and that's kind of where it was gray about how many points you go for to make the line.
So we're good for 50 million next year, the way this says.
minimum, right? But you're not sure about the
Well,
continual.
it says that we are above the line in this list and that we're eligible for carryover. That's what it says.
Right, but.
That's how I read
And
it
then
too.
clear to 50.
But we would need a vote by June 30th.
Oh, right.
470 million,
So that's the number now.
that's the number that we applied for.
So the 50 million is a cap, right? So that's
50 or
50 million is a cap per year, regardless.
But that was the cap of water, wasn't it?
No.
15
Did we have a cap?
15 for water.
No.
But some years we got 26 one year, so.
Good. Yeah, that's what I'm worried with them. So now we gotta,
Well, I had 2 phone calls with the DEP this week and both of them, they did not say that there was multi-year funding. They said, if you can only get $50 million, how will you do this project? And we were like, we can't
It's
do
not
this
started,
project
yeah.
if we. So I don't know, I'm just getting so many mixed messages, but I just read this and I brought it to Rich to read because
Yeah,
his understanding was my understanding, and then I look at the lists and it's this year's and continued funding lists, and we are not on the continued funding list, we're on the this year's list.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this means.
You got
No, it's, but it
Yeah.
clearly says prior projects and projects in this IUP, in which we
I
are,
understand,
we're right there.
but why would they tell us that we're not if
It
we
says
are?
total new projects. It's,
I know.
if you're a new project on this
I
list, it
think you
says
just
you get
gotta get them
continued
to
funding.
maybe put that in a letter somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that was the message when they had the public hearing, and just like all Cape communities, including Jackie, spoke up and said, hey, you cannot build half a plan, you can't build
Yeah.
half a system,
You
right?
can't go to
And
town
I think
meeting
they
for
must
that.
have, they never said anything during the meeting, but they must have gotten the message, right? If that's what they're doing.
Well, why wouldn't they have told us that when we were on
I
the
know.
phone?
And I talked to them just Friday,
And they said,
and they said, no, we can't promise.
can't promise,
Unless this
Years
just
we're
came
not-
out of the blue today, and they decided, let's just fund
or
it.
they didn't change it, I mean,
Oversight.
there is the caveat in there, but.
Well, I guess we don't.
Well, that's interesting, okay.
So we've been on full stop thinking
Yeah.
that there's no way that we can get the appropriation of 170 million if we can only prove financing for 50, right? But if we have an assurance that we have 170 million in $50 million increments, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, that's a bit of a sleight of the hand verbally, right? In the increments part, they don't
And the
say that.
increments isn't, I mean, we've already told them, we told them very clearly, we can work with the increments, that's not the issue, the issue is that
Guarantee.
total guarantee.
Knowing that they're coming.
When does next year's list come in?
What,
When does next year's list come out?
this time next year?
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
usually
But
the
if
draft
we don't,
change.
if we don't get, if we don't get town meeting to approve,
By
Well,
June
seven.
30th.
they're gonna drop us off the list, obviously.
They don't drop us off the list, they just don't fund us for this year.
And to me, I think this means, and this is what we have to verify.
Yeah.
Is we're on the list and all things being equal, we'll be on the list next
Next
year
year,
as a funded project.
This year.
I
We
don't
gotta
think,
get the town to approve.
I don't think we lose our space. And since we're on the list this year, we are on the group of towns that will get the commitment to the multi-year funding. I don't think it's, I don't, this, we have to verify this. I don't think it's contingent on us getting authorization by June
Do you-
30th of this year.
Is there any history of other towns that did not vote to fund and then got dropped off? Yeah, are you aware of any other?
well, if
You're
there's a
not
no
supposed
vote, we would get dropped off, they would not keep us on the plan if we get a no vote.
So they'll start moving people off the bottom from the lineup, right? So if you drop out, they're gonna give you 50 million to
To
somebody else.
somebody else?
Yeah.
But you still hold your
You're
position.
still for the following, correct, yeah.
Well, that's what I was asking, but the following year you're still there, I'm
Yep.
assuming you gotta vote.
But I think the confidence level, I mean, we're gonna work hard to
Oh, yeah.
be ready
Yeah.
for next year. But I think the confidence level, if we can, if we can get any kind of clarification that this, because they wouldn't even say they would take we'd have to, they told us we'd have to reapply.
That was based on the
Twice.
calls you had this week, right? This
Yeah.
past week.
So,
We always have to reapply, don't
Can
you?
we-
You don't take the funding.
Do what?
You don't take the funding, don't you always have to reapply?
What's the deadline to get,
Well-
to have the town vote? Is there a
June
deadline?
30th.
No, but in terms of having it officially printed up and everything, is there some?
Oh, we could do it in June. I mean, we have time.
That's too late for May. The warrant's been printed.
That's what I asked.
Oh, yes, too late for
It'll be a
now.
special if.
So we have this special, yeah.
Okay, that's why I was, okay, so you'd have to, it's gonna be a special no matter what, because the deadline for the regular meeting's already over.
It's, if we do it this year, it'll be a special. If we do it next year, it'll be a town meeting next year. The annual town meeting next year.
Boy,
just out of curiosity, if you got,
We could do a special earlier too.
Right, we can do one in the fall.
Yeah,
if you got town approval by June and you get the $50 million, do you have to spend that money before you go for the next 50, or you have to just show progress?
no, you just have to show progress.
I'm just saying, if you get the 50 this year with the town approval and say you didn't get it next year, you really haven't spent any money on construction yet.
But I mean, based on what Rich and Jack is saying right now,
Looks
if
like
you're
we're
on the
okay.
list, looks like you're okay. It doesn't matter, you're gonna get it.
And,
You're
and actually, the other shocking thing, I didn't think of this till just now. We got funding for a full 50.
Yeah,
A lot of these other, it looks like they got a modified,
just Bauman.
because several,
you got
One town.
partial?
has 83 million requested, got 2.37 million.
Wow.
53 million, oh no, it's 32.
32.
And what was our request? Was it
107.
170.
We got 50.
One for 49 and a half.
But that's the
million.
maximum, right, per year, 50?
Yeah, but that's what they
That's the
gave
max.
us. The
Yeah.
point is, people asked for, you know,
Okay.
Lowell asked for 49.5 million, we got 5 million.
Hmm.
So a lot of people don't get the full funding, we got the full funding, the full
Correct,
50.
But
Which
that
was the-
could
which was the
also be,
limit,
Rich,
right.
because they said, we're gonna start our project, you know, next, I don't know. We won't spend all the money, but we need the
Right, if they
agreement.
revise this, if we don't move forward, this is gonna say we asked for 170, and we got 0.
Zero.
Mhm. Or maybe they give us a buck or something. I don't know.
And when we talked to them on the phone, I mean, one of the reasons they wanted us to be on the plan and funded was so we would be more attractive to USDA, which will happen later in the year, and that we might be able to pick up some funding from USDA that will help us with the $50 million
So
cap.
how much do we, I guess, how much do we need between now and next year?
It depends whether
where
we
we are
wanna
in the
go full
project.
speed ahead.
If we, let's just say we.
The town said yes.
Got the approval, how much would we actually use? I mean, what I'm getting at is how much ground are we losing by not taking it this year versus going
Well,
to town meeting next year?
I have to think if you decline this, you may have to reapply next year for the.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking how much money would we spend between this year and next year?
Just to.
How much do we actually really need?
If you were to go to
In other words,
construction,
let's say that they said,
Well,
no, you don't get the
Based
rest.
upon the
Would
project
we
plan where
expect
we
the
are
full
right now.
50, or would we?
Yeah.
I don't think so. It depends. It's all on their schedule. So once this draft IUP comes out, then if we had 100% design, our permits and everything, we could immediately move forward. October of this year is the deadline, like the absolute max, when most people submit. And then it cycles, so June of next year, we'd need contracts signed with all the contractors. So if we were following the normal schedule, submit in October, go out to bid January, February, March next year. Have everyone under contract in June. By the time they start, they go through all the submittals. You know, it's the fall, so
September,
you're kind of
yeah.
looking September,
We're not spending
December.
a lot between now and.
A year from now.
That's your point.
The
That's your point.
issue is the authorizations, because like we can't sign contracts unless we
No money's
have
coming.
the
No, I know.
authorization.
But then if we slip it to the next town meeting, are we looking at the same schedule you just laid out, that we're looking at the
Yeah.
following June?
Yeah.
We-
So it's really frustrating that you only get one bite.
Of the apple.
And, you know, there's no second round or
right,
mid-year.
So. I'm thinking, if we wanna go for it, how do we feel out the town where we are? I mean, we have an opportunity at town meeting
Does
to
the
do
select
that.
board know about this? Do they know that this happened?
No,
Or they
no.
don't know yet. You have
no,
not,
they know the bad news.
they don't know
they
this.
don't-
Not just was.
I mean, they know we're back on the plan.
Oh, they do.
But the select board knows that we're back on the plan, because they told us, they called us twice. It was ridiculous how much support we were getting. So, so I was you know, you're trying to read through the lines and they say, no, we can't guarantee this, but you know, you have a solid application, you'll have a solid application next year. So, I mean,
But the other thing that's not known, is it says we're authorized up to 50 million. Is that 50 million at the 0%?
No, you don't know that
We
either.
don't
50
know
million
that.
at 2.5%.
You don't know that. They don't, when do they tell you that?
they don't tell you that until you
They go
get
to
the
our-
letter.
What do you mean the letter?
The letter that says we're offering you
A formal
$50
thing.
million.
Because this is just a list, but then there's an
Yeah, I'm
actual
sorry.
formal letter. that-
project
Yes.
approval certificate, the back, right?
And that won't come for
Yeah.
a long time.
What do you mean a long time, Jackie? I mean, that would be a key piece of information to know going into, any town meeting.
Yeah,
You would not know that for a year.
Really? Cause Rich,
Remember how when we went into water, Sheila kept saying that we were gonna try for 0%, we're gonna try for 0%?
yeah,
Remember that over and over and over again? And then we got the first letter and it was at 2.4.
but all Rich's, careful calculations about how to make this work are based on the 0%.
That's
Right.
true. That's true, and,
Yeah.
you know, that's the other unknown that's gonna happen this year too, is if federal funding drops and then SRF has to deal with the funding that they have in their kitty, which is considerable, then they might say, we can still fund you, but
But
it'll
at
be
some
at
rate.
2.4 or,
But all
Yeah.
that being said. For sake of argument, let's say it does come through to be 0% for this first round. And then what Jackie says is also true, that something more in the next round. That, to me, that kind of is what it is,
right,
if that's the best case scenario. But the best case scenario isn't getting any better, you know what I'm saying? So even if we got 0% for one round, that's the best we're gonna get at this point. You know, unless we wanna wait this whole thing out, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years.
we'll also still get loan forgiveness, and Rich you haven't calculated any loan forgiveness into your,
No, well, I wouldn't suspect that
Forecast.
they're gonna do a lot of forgiveness if they're gonna go up to 2.5%.
Yeah,
so I guess the thing is, this is the thing that rattles around in my brain constantly. And before I got this, I was convinced that we shouldn't go to a special town meeting, but now the rattling has started again. And what I think is, we don't know. The truth is, we're not sure, right? But are we going to be 100% sure next year? Maybe we'll know more next year, but we won't be 100% sure. So do we try and go for it as a contingent vote? You know, we will do this if we get A, B, C, and D. Could we get authorization that way?
Well, once we start, we gotta keep going, so.
Right.
It can't be contingent on too many things. But the other thing, Peter, on the calculations I did of how we pay for it, there was a middle ground of a 2.5%
You
financing.
did the math, that's all
And
I
that was-
saw it, yeah.
That was doable. I mean, obviously
Wasn't
not as
great.
You
attractive,
showed what it would mean for taxes and you had it in there.
right?
yeah, more
The other
painful,
thing is- But the other thing that's not in there is I didn't have anything in there for USDA. And so USDA would probably be a similar interest rate, maybe a little bit lower,
However,
but for 40 years. And there's up to, you know, I doubt we'd get 75%, but there's up to a 75% loan forgiveness of that as well. So if we were to get that for, say, what was the max, $30 million?
yeah,
75% forgiven at 1.8%, that might make up for not getting some zero from SRF.
Yeah,
And we
What's
still, go ahead, Peter.
excuse me, what's the latest on USDA? Is there any more recent news than the last time we spoke?
they have formally accepted all of our proposals, all of our information. That's where we are. But their grant cycle doesn't, it's just beginning now.
it's October, right?
The federal.
It's federal fiscal year.
They didn't have as strict dates, and the way they handled it was it's all up in the air. They don't know what's happening federally, how much money they'll have. They did mention, I think, one other project that they had maybe an application for, so we're kind of first in. But it's so much money, they have to then go through our application and bring it to the national level, and we're competing against projects
All over the
nationally.
place.
And what he was saying is their region, the Southeast region, usually has gotten a maximum of $30 million a year for all the projects. So that's where we don't know. Would we get like 10 million and then maybe 10 million and 10 million and 10 million? Would we get 30 million and then no more? What would we get?
The next year, in the spring, second round, you'll know about additional funding at that point, and you won't be any different than you are now as far as expenditure of money. You wouldn't have committed any money. So
Yeah.
say you got another 50 or another 30, then you can make a decision next year before you start signing contracts or possibly go out to bid. I guess we're bidding in the spring, right?
Yeah,
Well, I don't know what you guys carry for delayed construction, but you know, the problem is. And I guess maybe even the problem now, because who knows
We have
what
a
tariffs
30%
might be on different
contingency.
things.
now.
Cost of material.
But you know, usually delay of construction, when I was doing this in other towns, you know, is, you know, 4 to 5% inflation for every year that you wait.
And I mean, this is the other thing, and there are obviously pros and cons. We wouldn't know until we put it in front of the voters, but everyone's so nervous now, the world is so uncertain now. I can imagine that a lot of people, including me, are gonna be like, you know, maybe we should wait. But on the other hand, as Rich says, it will only be more expensive.
Never gonna go down.
How much of your equipment is made overseas?
Oh,
A lot of it. A lot of it, yeah.
And the other piece to USDA was we originally approached them too to fund the design and permitting money as well. And that's what we did a lot for the water project,
Mm.
but they want to be part of the construction too. We would have to have that piece. They wouldn't only fund design money.
which is great. We'll let them fund whatever they want.
Again, really, thank you very much.
And so are we still, but then the Cape and Islands Water Trust is still,
If we have SRF, we still have that.
How much is that?
It's 25% of this, 25% of 50 million a year.
Well, it's really 25% of whatever our debt service is.
Right, it's 25% of the debt service. But on 50 million, not on the total project.
It would be every round we get.
Right.
So that's why the 0% is nice and easy, right? So,
Correct.
you know, it was,
5 million a year in debt service, then. We
so at
could,
170 million.
So if you're looking at pros and cons, and if you don't go for a special town meeting prior to
5.6.
June, what's the negatives?
well, the inflation cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, inflation costs and probably less attractive financing.
I mean, last year, we wouldn't have any of these problems,
Mm.
right? So that's the, you know,
But 170 million, 0% is 5.6 million of debt service. Water
lot.
protection trust would be 1.4 million of that, so now we're down to 4.2 million.
And you calculated that over what time
Right.
period?
30.
30 years. And then we
30
have a million and a half, a million three, whatever in short term.
Oh, right, okay. Okay.
If we go into a recession, though, that would be less too, you know?
Yes,
And see, something they gotta do with the finance committee for the upcoming meeting is the results through March, the receipts. There's a bunch that are down, so short-term rentals included. So,
I said that the other day, I said, I mean, less Quebec license plates.
Well, we pretty much poked everybody in the eye with a hot stick this year, I think,
Oh,
federally and locally.
yeah,
Even the penguins.
even the penguins, yeah, they're annoying too.
So,
Well, I guess we need to get clarification on whether or not we've got
That's job
multi-year
one, yeah.
funding. And then I guess we just have to noodle to think how, it almost seems like town meeting is an opportunity to feel out the voters about this whole thing.
do we have to tell them if we get a no vote? Can we hide it?
Why not do some kind of a presentation?
So the town meeting is May 5th or something, or,
That's
and
right.
then they need an answer by June 30th, so you theoretically want to have a separate meeting like early June, right? Sort of like,
June 28th.
Yeah, we don't have to have it too much. Would we have to have a separate election? I mean, a ballot?
Monday is June 30th, that's probably too right.
Yeah.
You do a Saturday, June 28th, I think.
right,
And everyone would be like, we have to work, it's a Saturday, they just snuck this in.
Yeah, and but we also wouldn't have an election, right?
We have to, yeah,
Because
we
we
have to. have
can't
an
vote, I don't know that they require that, though, do they?
They require the town meeting authorization. When we go out to borrow, we'd have to have the bonding authorization.
No, my point is, you could get the town meeting authorization,
And
but
then
you've
the
got a
vote.
whole year to have an election to vote to make it exempt,
And
because
that's-
obviously you can't.
That's what happened in 2013. Water passed at the ballot, but not at the town meeting.
huh,
So we had the
Was the reverse.
authorization to borrow.
Because that was a majority vote, not a
2/3. So the override is the 2/3 part, that's what
So
you.
the ballot is, the override is on. the-
Balance.
The
Majority.
authorization to borrow is a town meeting vote is a 2/3.
2/3.
Gotcha,
But it's not, you don't have to put all borrowing on the ballot, only the borrowing that you wanted to have is exempt as like an override exempt debt.
That's what I meant, yeah, exactly.
So if you don't want exempt debt, I mean, you don't need to vote at the ballot. But of course we do, because we can't swing an extra
It's a
2,
big
3
number,
million
it's a
in the
big
budget.
number, yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with Fred that maybe it would be good to bring it to town meeting as soon as we can. And find out what the sense of town meeting is. There are so many unknowns. I know people are gonna be skittish. But, you know, is a price to pay for waiting. So it might not be a bad thing, you know, to have it to town meeting and see what happens.
So you have 3 weeks to hopefully clarify what you got this week. So
I
that
don't think so.
You don't think?
No, I think we have to clarify this ASAP and then
Well, I
I
mean,
think Rich
You
and I have
had
to.
3 weeks to get it done. I think you're gonna wait.
Yeah,
3
Rich
weeks.
and I have to put our heads together and
No.
honestly, it's been so frustrating. I think we should set a deadline for when we decide. Like literally, if we're gonna do a special in June, then we need some kind of presentation ready for town meeting
Yes,
in May 5th, so that
Yes.
we can at least introduce it.
yes. I just meant how long to get, you need that, like hopefully next week. I mean,
Yeah,
right, or whatever.
Yeah, what I said was assuming that that Rich's interpretation is
Is correct. Yes, I agree. Yes. Yeah.
reality.
it's a wild ride.
It is a wild ride.
That
Yeah,
is,
The voters are gonna be in a same position we are, like, wait a minute, I don't know if my social security check gonna be coming next week, how am I gonna vote to raise my taxes? But
It's a big
transparency,
one. I mean, it's not minor. I mean, this is,
So it was gonna be tricky
it was,
anyway.
right,
Well, I guess not to get off topic too much, but and maybe talk about this another time, but. You know, the whole point of doing this, I mean, obviously, to clean up the environment is the primary point, but the secondary point is. We were all on the Cape supportive of DEP regulations mandating IAs within a certain amount of time.
Right.
On the premise that we had SRF 0% funding that was guaranteed.
right,
So that may or may not be the case, but regardless, those DEP regulations are still there. And so, yeah, nobody's gonna like this, but you might like it a lot more than having to do it all by yourself. And I don't know, you know, I think we need to get some clarification on that, what that means to our residents, which at the moment, probably nothing, because we
right.
aren't designated as such, but we will be.
Oh, there'll be a mandate for the IAs, is what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if they hadn't have funded us, then it would be a good case for. How can you punish us if you're not giving us the money? But
is our design status support staying on schedule
We'll get into this,
if we jumped into it? I didn't mean to jump ahead, I'm just.
no, I
a
mean,
question.
I know we're gonna discuss it here today, and I know Lauren's gonna, give us an update on the plan too, but, you know, I think without jumping ahead, if it's just a matter if the plan isn't ready, I mean, we could get going with the collection system, right? That's something we could
Right.
certainly do.
Okay,
And then we could put a couple of contracts out there and then, you know, just show some progress.
so it's gotta be shovel and ground, doesn't
Right.
matter where the shovel is.
Right.
Okay.
And on the plant is more complicated for the collection system, you're talking about pipe, you know, usually it's manufactured here, right? We got some pump stations perhaps.
Yes.
That could be somewhat delayed, but for the most part, the gravity is a lot easier than the plant itself.
Right.
So
And of the overall cost, what's the percentage that's the collection system versus the plant? In percent?
From the 170.
Yeah.
I think the collection was
I think the collection was 80.
2/3 of that, right? About, yeah, slightly over the plant, right? More, a little bit more, not 50%.
So do you wanna set a date for like next week? We gotta open the line.
Hmm,
Is Robin the person they're gonna reach back to, or do you want us to reach out to Michelle Higgins?
That's who I talked to on Friday.
We talked to
Robin.
Or Robin, yeah.
Robin, Kathy, yeah. I have her name written down, and then there's they assigned us a new person and I have his name and number. He's replacing, guy who left Jackie. I talked to him as well.
Well,
It's been a lot of people.
let's have a,
Have a
have
cookie,
one.
that's good.
Absolutely.
That's a good idea. A little
There
sugar.
you
a
go.
little cookie, and
So
then
pass me
maybe
the-
we go off into, planning, but.
Sorry, Peter.
We're also having a meeting, Friday morning, the Cape and Islands Selectmen, Counselor and Managers Association, I forget what they call themselves, but, is meeting at the Sheraton, and the topic is wastewater, so we'll be hearing
Hmm,
the latest.
Other people that are in the
Yeah.
same boat as us.
No, because everybody else has been funded before. Falmouth, is Falmouth in phase one? Yeah, Falmouth is in phase one, so Falmouth. But they've cut theirs into pieces, so they have a $60 million piece and so like if we were just applying for phase one, then we just need authorization for phase one. But we can't phase this easily.
Where's Yarmouth?
It's on the carryover list. Because they got funded last year. Oh. Oh. They dropped off because they couldn't get full authorization, maybe, I don't know. So. It's the date, the 8th. Well, we can get clarification by Monday.
Today's Tuesday.
By 14th. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare something for this town meeting. But I think people are interested in the money and am I gonna get it or not? Those are the two.
Yeah, with the map out, that's
And if I'm not gonna get it, what is it gonna do for me? And I think that's an easy one to answer. And we do have some properties in Northeast Eastham that are in the Wellfleet watershed that will be under IA regardless, right? So we have to figure that out too.
Did they finalize that?
Yeah.
They did. So I thought the selectmen were pushing back.
Oh, I don't know what the Board of Health regulations, if they've passed, but the DEP accepted their plan, so the clock is ticking, so to speak.
The clock is ticking and we did submit the letter of intent that we were going to continue to work with Wellfleet to refine a plan. It's still unknown what they'll do with Maurice's campground and where that wastewater will go. So the last discussion I had with them, I did indicate that that might be of interest, let us know how you're progressing. So we have to continue conversations with Wellfleet.
So you want to move on to treatment plant design, and we'll circle back when I'm really sorry. You can't imagine how sorry I am that we can't answer these basic questions by today, because really we've been struggling with them now since
Oh, we were good on Friday,
March.
but now.
It's a lot of other, it's another chunk of information for the May meeting but will people then start asking, like you just said, where am I on this map? I'm not in it. What's an IA? Will I get help funding it? So maybe having some answers to those kinds of questions in May will help push people over the line to vote for something that doesn't actually cover them,
Yeah,
but but they're gonna get help if they need something on their own. So maybe you wanna have some kind of clarity on that. I'm just.
Well, those are good questions, and I don't wanna bog down the meeting, but maybe we should talk about that just a little bit, so we have all have
Yeah.
the same understanding, but. You know, one of the points of doing this centralized treatment solution,
Right,
community solution, is to prevent the people, even whether you're connected or not,
to have.
from having to do an
I
IA.
Okay, so then just to
And Hillary,
clarify all
I
that.
ask you this like 12 times, like once a month I ask you this question. I would confirm with you that that's in fact the case, right?
That is correct. That is the case unless and until DEP changes the regulations, but there's no talk of that at the moment.
and they're busy right now, you know, panicking.
So, you know, that's a key point that,
Yeah,
you know, whether and that's also part of our financing
That's-
thing.
that's
That's why
part of the
everyone that, to the extent it goes on the tax rate, everyone's gonna have to contribute because you're making out, you know, some people had to connect and they pay a usage charge for having to connect. You don't have to pay a usage charge,
but your taxes are gonna go up.
but you gotta pay some taxes
Yeah.
because you are benefiting because now you
Right.
don't do the IA.
And I
Yeah.
think that is one of the collection of reasons why we could answer the question, why now? Why not wait?
Correct.
We could probably wait. Why not wait? Well,
Well, this is
there,
an answer.
it's one of the answers.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, water's-
I'm just suggesting that you have those ready to kind of roll out.
We're ready loosely. I think we're ready until we get to is my property in the area? Maybe, maybe not, you know, kind of, we're still at that stage.
I think you look, are we gonna get the money or not?
Yeah.
We do also have the question and answers for the questions that have come in already on the website. So we do have some of the answers to those questions already out there to the public.
But
And we
besides-
also,
We will definitely have to do more than what we've done. We've got a lot of these
Oh my
answers
God.
ready, as Hillary says, but we're gonna have to actually actively outreach and do
Well,
videos.
I think if we
Yes.
stoke a little demand here and let people know that we're gonna talk about this, even though it's not on the warrant, we wanna talk about it
Mhm.
this year, maybe
Yeah.
more people will come to the town meeting who weren't going to before.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get a better feel for the people that actually show up when we have one of these important things on, like the water. When water was on, you were standing remotely, right? So-
Would you potentially want to be able to announce at the May meeting that there will be another special meeting?
Yes,
Oh, we'll know by then whether to do.
I'm just saying that you're going to be able
a
to
date
say,
and time, yes, absolutely.
yeah,
And we'll talk about what it's gonna be.
yeah,
I think that might get some people off the couch.
yeah,
No doubt.
okay, wow. Okay,
I just had one more thought. EPG had put together sort of an interactive map that we have not put out to the public yet. I know I use it when I talk to some people that have questions just to see who's in the area, who's out of the area. So we do have that tool in rough form. It's never going to be probably exact until we're done design. So I don't know where we would stand with allowing people to use that, but it's another tool that we have.
Well, I think we'd have to use it. We just have to say this is the tentative sewer area,
just the geography, yeah, but as we know it.
It's probably
can't
pretty close to.
not have that available and be talking about sewer, you know what I mean? It's kind of-
Yeah,
But I think your point about the DIA system is for the rest of the town is a key point,
mhm,
and the cost of it.
mhm.
Hillary, I have a question for you for the general information stuff that I've been meaning to ask. So, you know, it's big picture. The state determined, or we got sued, you know, the whole lawsuit business, about having to clean up the water. And the way I understood it was all the towns on the Cape were you know, affected by that lawsuit.
Mhm.
You had to either put in a centralized sewer system, or everybody had to put in IA systems. Am I sort of correct? Like, what my question is, why does Brewster not have to put in sewers?
So Peter, it's
You have to
partially,
have an approved plan.
it's partially correct, but the main thing, the result of that wasn't that we had to do a IA or centralized sewer. The
No.
result was the Cape Cod Commission had to adopt what's called the 208 plan.
Oh,
They
wait,
got
yeah.
it was a settlement, it wasn't a lawsuit, and the settlement was the DEP was gonna work with the commission to monitor progress of all the communities on Cape Cod. And the commission does that through the what's called the 208 plan. So we're required to submit something to them every year demonstrating our progress. And if we're
Then,
not demonstrating progress, then theoretically you've got problems. But then in the meantime, DEP came out with revised regulations.
they decided we were not making enough progress.
DEP, okay, yeah.
DEP did, and they amended their regulations.
And now the regulations say if you're a nitrogen sensitive area, which we haven't received the official designation, but we are, then you need to have remediation of nitrogen.
And this is proof that we are, because we managed to get on the
Yeah, I
list.
guess I heard that the whole Cape was in the nitrogen sensitive area, but that may not be true.
It's not true.
Not true.
Most towns probably have one watershed maybe that is, but Brewster has a direct discharge into Cape Cod Bay.
Yeah,
So so they don't have that designation. It's mostly tributaries, and streams and ponds and rivers.
Plus Brewster, long time ago, there's only 2 towns on the Cape that went to acre lot minimums early on. One was Brewster and one was Marston's Mills, or one little town within Barnstable, which didn't help Barnstable as a whole. Brewster has had that zoning forever. So they do not have the density. They have a lot more land mass, as Rich said, and they don't have the density. They have a lot more foresty kind of.
a lot more deed restricted open space.
And they do have a plan, and it's a good plan, but it just doesn't include traditional sewers.
I just thought Hillary should put that on her list, because I think that question will be coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else like them? Or
No.
the other one?
I mean, there's places that we've heard just anecdotally are more in trouble with DEP than we are. Like, for instance, Falmouth has like 19 watersheds there. They've made very little progress and they're in trouble with DEP. Barnstable has a 20-year plan. They've been moving along. They're doing fine. Provincetown's great, Chatham's great. So there's certain towns that have done better and certain towns that have done worse. We're so small, they kind of, I mean, they care about us, but they don't really care about us.
And the same thing with Brewster, I should say. Yarmouth is in the same boat, Dennis too. No sewering on the north side of those towns. It's all south, because it discharges into Nantucket Sound, and in our case, it discharges into Salt Pond, Estuary. Brewster actually has impact to Pleasant Bay, but it's negligible, so it's easier for them to just pay Harwich and Chatham to do something about it.
All right.
Okay.
We had with treatment.
We'll get onto the agenda.
It's just a general.
Here's the first 10 minutes, right?
Well, we get the USDA, so it's it's fine.
So GHD did submit 30% design on the treatment plant. And last Monday, we had a workshop, they introduced everything, walked through it all. So I have Lauren from GHD on the call, who's just gonna walk through a presentation for you guys.
The one that was on the website?
I think is it on SharePoint? Lauren?
It is not on SharePoint, but I can load it up to SharePoint.
No, I mean, it was in the, it was in the package that we
Yep.
got.
It's this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so actually this is a slightly different presentation. That was a 2-hour workshop, so that was slightly different. There's some components of that is in this presentation as well. So if you have the hard copies, it's not the same presentation, but I can send this to everybody or load it up on our SharePoint site so everybody can have it as well.
That'd be great.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So as Jackie said, let me make sure. Okay. As Jackie said, we had our 30% workshop last Monday. And we had a package that probably some of you have that included just some drawings, a lot of tech memos that are going to be incorporated into a full-blown basis of design report. And behind those tech memos are a plethora of calculations on how, we calculated everything in there. So yeah, so I wanted to go over a few things that we have today, really going over a site layout, so everyone has a good understanding of what buildings are remaining, what buildings are going to be new. I think we've gone over, I think maybe one of the last CPC meetings, I think 2 months ago, you had a rough layout. It might be slightly different, and obviously a lot more has been populated on the drawings. Next, we'll go over the administrative slash operations building, which we do have some architectural renderings and some first floor layouts of. Actually, the whole project is going to be done in Civil 3D or Revit, which is a 3D modeling software. So the other buildings that we have will be able to have, like 3D renderings and isometrics available for, town meetings. I don't want to say this town meeting May 5th, but for future meetings, you'll have some nice renderings to share. Then we'll go over the treatment plant process, and then you can feel free to ask any questions. And then, of course, feel free to interrupt me if you've got a question that you want answered based on what I went over. So with that, I guess for the people that are in the room, do you have a hard copy of the drawings?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's something that looks really small, I apologize. Obviously, 11:7 or a drawing on a screen might not be that big. I do have slides that show things enlarged, but if you do want to reference something, it will be in front of you as well. So we wanted to talk about some of the new facilities. We will be replacing the salt shed, as that is in our recharge bed area. We'll be having a generator installed. Like I mentioned, the administrative and operations building, the treatment building, which will house some of the process equipment and the SBR tanks, as well as 6 groundwater recharge beds. So here is our overall layout. Just as a note that the DPW garage and the sticker office and the fuel island will remain in place once this is built. So we have essentially left some space over in this area for the future build out of a DPW facility when you guys decide to do that down the road. So this is a bit of a zoom in, and to make things a little easier, I just kind of put some boxes over it. So the existing salt shed is in this general area right here. So we will be moving this over to this corner. This driveway will stay as is and should be an easier in and out and turning for your staff. We have a generator. However, based on our 30% design, we haven't gotten to all the edits. This will most likely move to the other side of the administrative building, just so it's not near the parking, and we have ample room for the DPW facility in the future. This is our administrative and operations building. This will be the public facing side where the DPW offices will be, where the residents can pay their sewer or I believe water bill. So that will be on this side of the building. And the other side will be some of our process equipment, filters and disinfection. Over here will be our treatment building. And I have another drawing that will go into a little bit more detail on that, but it has essentially some process rooms on this side, and then it'll be open process tanks on the back end over here. And there is odor control on these tanks in certain areas. We'll be putting covers on the more odorous areas to prevent that from being a nuisance. And this obviously is our groundwater recharge bed area. So moving on, And again, feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. So this is our administrative and operations building. As I showed in the last drawing, this shorter part of the building is the public facing side. So that will be this one-story structure over here where the offices for the DPW and the operations team will be. Again, over here is our filter building and other processes. You know, we got a little overhead door over here to get things in and out. So this is some of the types of renderings that we'll see that are produced in Revit as opposed to AutoCAD for those who are familiar.
From a funding standpoint, are we mixing DPW with the sewer groups, or is that an issue? Or
Operationalized for us, it doesn't make much of a difference. I think it's probably a net positive for us. One of the things we need to work out, there is some floor plan, and that's one of the things we took away from the 30% design meeting, is making sure it meets our needs. But the concept was have DPW admin in this building, including the water, so that you have one spot to go.
Does that affect our funding at all? So it's not
There might be a piece,
strictly,
theoretically, there could be a piece that we'd have to pay for ourselves. That SRF or another entity would pay for, but I don't, hopefully it's, in my mind, it's negligible.
USDA might be. It's
How
very
much of
similar
that
to the
building
school
is-
building project where you have
no,
some.
but I mean, the current operations for DPW are in the building that's.
Yeah, we're not talking about-
being preserved,
We're
right?
not talking about everybody, we're not talking about highway staff. We're just talking about administrative staff, so it's literally 2 or 3 offices extra. She's got the plan up.
Yeah, so to build upon what Rich said, you know, this is something that we talked about that would be a benefit, that you wouldn't have to rehouse your DPW staff in, you know, the future, whether that's 10 years down the road or what have you. You know, they would already have a place in this new building when the DPW is redone. So yeah, so as Rich said, this was our initial layout. We are actually currently working on some of the edits from the 30% design, and had a brainstorming session ourselves with our team. I really was hoping to get those today, but they'll probably be at the end of this week, is what we're anticipating, and I'll forward those to the town. But we did go through a few design edits. One of the things that the town was looking to have a better separation between the operations area and the more public facing area of the building. So this was originally the break room, which we've now had the idea of moving over into this office, and we'll be adding an additional door over here so that the DPW or billing staff can enter it, and then the operations staff can enter it, but it's a little bit more separated. The other thing that we are trying to do is keep the actual operations separate from any potential, you know, public facing spaces. So just so they can't wander into the filter building, which is, you know, over in this area. So there'll be basically a division of this office right here to give us 2 office areas. This would be for the operations staff. And then we originally had essentially a control room workstation that the operations staff can, you know, remotely see their alarms and SCADA system. So we're moving that and putting it, we're actually thinking about making this an open area. So as the staff comes in and out of the building, you know, they can see their screens and be able to see if there's any alarms or anything going for them to do some maintenance. And then we are also looking at a combined locker facility, and then having 2 shower stall units. So essentially this locker room area would move up to the middle, and then we'd have showers on each side. Again, it is not quite figured out yet as to whether it'd be contract operations or, you know, operated by town staff, but you want to have enough facilities in case it goes one way or the other. So that's what we're looking at for the admin building, in particular the office side. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay. So next, related to the buildings, during some of our biweekly calls with the town, we were discussing how visible some of the areas would be on the site to Orchard Road. So we did have our team go through and do some essentially elevation cuts, going from the sand beds to the SBR and to Orchard Road, and similarly through the admin building. So if you have this one in front of you as well, it might be a little easier to see some of the heights. But this is the proposed SBR building, which is this area right here, which is kind of set in that depression on the DPW site. And really the level of Orchard Road is much higher than that. So there would not be a whole lot of the building visible from any, passersby in a car. If they're walking, there is a tree line here, but they might be able to see through. And this is the more process-oriented building. So for comparison, and it's a little faint in this, but this is the height of the DPW garage in relation to the site. And this is the height of our new, down here. This is the height of our new admin building. So this one would be a little bit elevated, but it's this, I guess I'd say this, nicer, more fancy looking structure as opposed to one that will be partially tanks. So that's the taller building that you might see. So, and you can look at it here, the profiles with the stationing, if you would like.
And Lauren, how far away is that from the road?
I believe this is 100-foot buffer from the roadway to the property line. So it's just about 100 feet.
One of the things we talked about, which we would like to do anyway, regardless of this. But if you drive by there, the fencing is a bit old and in disrepair.
So you take the opportunity to
Yeah, so-
upgrade everything.
As part of this project, we really want to redefine and rehabilitate that whole,
Correct, yeah.
what do you call that?
Boundary.
Buffer.
Yeah, I got a call from someone that lives on the corner of Bracken and Orchard, I think, and they were like, where's this gonna be? Am I gonna see it?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, the neighborhood is upset, so they've been trying to they've been getting together and talking about it. So that's one of my notes is, before we go to town meeting, we have to sit down and have a meeting with that.
So it's hard to say exactly what it looked like, but I think it's important for us to, as a commitment to the town when we talk about
Yes.
this. Okay, it's 100-foot buffer. It's not what it ought to be right now, and we're, committed to making it better as part of this project.
Yeah.
It will be visible at times based on tree cover and the time of year,
Vegetation,
obviously,
right, in the winter time.
Yeah.
Right.
and-
I don't know if there's an opportunity, I'm sure it's something we'll have to go through, but if there's an opportunity to introduce trees that don't lose their leaves, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, there's
We
a,
have to.
there's a fence by the transfer station. What if you extend the fence all the way across this road here to cover?
It is an open patch right now, there's an open
right.
spot, yeah.
Lauren, one thing, and I agree that the SBR building is, you're trying to use the depression because you're trying to get there by gravity, correct? From the SBR to the recharge beds?
No, so we're trying to get by gravity from the collection system to the SBR building.
Correct, but like in the depression right there, you're pumping up from the treatment up to the, but from the SBR to, if you go on the cut on the right side in the middle, middle section right there, right?
Yep.
From there, you go into the beds by gravity.
So actually from the SBR building right here, it actually gets pumped up to the filter building. And right now it'll go from the filter building, and we're working on some options with the carbon removal to try to make it by gravity. If we can't, we may have to pump it through the carbon units. There's a lot of head loss on those, and the UV system. So, but we're looking at some options to try to make it by gravity to reduce the pumping. So yeah, so it's pumped from here, or it flows by gravity down into the SBR building. It's pumped up into,
The
or well, I
filter.
guess I see what you're saying. So it's pumped up into the SBR tanks here, and then it's also then pumped up into the filter building.
Right. I mean, the question is, if you were to lower the building, if you have to, you could pump it up to the tanks, right? I mean, to the recharge beds, if we have to.
If you wanted to lower this building. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, in theory, yes.
You'd have to add pumps and such, but it's doable if it becomes
Yeah.
an issue.
A lot of this is related to maintaining a smaller slope to allow the tractor trailers and sledge hauling tanks to have a reasonable drive. But yeah, we could make this deeper. Any other questions on this?
How tall is the building as drawn now, do you know?
So this one is just under, so this is the SBR, and that's, I think, just under 20 feet right now. We're working on some of the final tanks that are going into that building, some of the chemical tanks, which could increase it a little bit, but not all that much. So that's that Old Orchard Road elevation, and this is where the building is right now at about, I think, 48. Elevation 48.
Those profiles don't show the filter building, right? Am I missing?
So this is, sorry, it's, I wonder if I can, so this is the,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is the SBR building, this is the SBR building, and this is the admin building right here. So yeah, if you look in here.
Yeah.
So
how tall is the sand admin building? Is that
so the admin building right now is, I think this is about 35, it's about 20 feet also.
okay?
There is a mezzanine, so with the peak of the roof, it might be a little bit higher. But these were some of the initial calculations that we did for ceiling height.
Yeah. Yeah, that one with the two stories, right? Almost a big barn. It looks to be closer to 30 feet to the peak.
Yeah, you're probably right on that.
Oh, and
So
my other question back a couple slides was, is it typical to have locker rooms and showers in these facilities?
Oh, definitely, yes. Yeah, some municipalities, actually, have uniforms for their staff, and they take them all off because there is, the potential for pathogens. So they do, if you don't hook up the sludge hose right, you're going to be covered in sludge. So they definitely have those available for the staff.
Lauren, I saw the floor plan without getting into the details. I never had a chance to review this yet, but it looks like you only have one locker room. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were trying to save on space, partially for just, for the fiscal aspect. But what we are actually doing instead, we are having a combined locker area that people would grab their clothes out of, or their lunch, whatever they're keeping in there, and then we would have two separate shower facilities. So what we're looking at is essentially if you moved this whole section up and you put another shower facility here and added a door on the side. So to save on space, it is something that if there's a particular request one way or the other, we could add it, but to save on space, we left one locker room because we're not anticipating more than, a few operators for this size plant.
I wonder though if the code review would require one, for female, one for male.
Our architectural staff did look into that, and he was the one that actually suggested this one only. So I don't think I'd have to get back to you on the specific codes. I know there's been some changes over the years, but yeah, so these would actually be two gender neutral bathrooms over here. And at this time, he was suggesting this, and we all kind of agreed that it would be better to have 2 shower facilities.
And changing it, right?
Right. So so this is like a shower, changing area, and bathroom all in one. And we'd have the same thing on this side as well.
Could there
So-
be a separate door to the locker room for men and women, so they don't have, it looks, yeah, it doesn't look like it's set up for that.
Right. So
Great.
Well,
You gotta
thinking
have
if I
male-
could draw on this.
Yeah, it's all right. I just, you should have it
Just
easily
anticipate,
accessible
yeah.
to both without having to cross over.
Yes.
But,
Yeah. So
Is there-
I would
Is there
say
other
maybe.
code issues, Lauren?
Yep.
If the code requires it, then I guess we've got what we got, but. Is there examples? I mean, to me, and again, it doesn't bother me. I'm not saying it would not bother other people, but as long as the changing room and the shower room is lockable. Is there an issue with a single versus a male, female?
A single versus male and female. Honestly, when our architectural staff looked at it, he was just suggesting the one room.
That's what I'm asking, right? I mean, as long as it can be locked and it's secured, I mean.
Yeah. So there wouldn't be the intent for, I mean, some treatment plants, they might not have a locker room, but knowing that we've got, the potential for staff that's, I guess, a little bit more transient. If it is an operations firm taking care of it, they might want to keep some stuff in a locker locked up. So when they come to this plant and, do what they need to do, take samples or whatever their job is for the day, they'll have a space that they can keep to themselves and locked.
I'm not asking about the locker room. I'm asking about the shower / changing room.
Oh, okay.
I mean, as long as, do you need to? I mean, obviously, if you're gonna shower or use the bathroom or change, you're probably locking the door.
Right.
Matter that there's one versus two for, a male / female.
Yeah,
Why can't we have a separate showers and changing rooms in a communal locker room in the middle?
Because you might only have 2 or 3 people working here. I mean, how many do you?
No, but you don't know whether they're gonna be male or female.
Can't predict.
We can't say we're gonna only hire men.
Yeah.
We're only gonna hire men.
That's what I'm asking. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think it does.
I mean,
I could tell you one thing, Lauren, you could be 100% right. I'm not an architect, but I did a couple of years ago, the Dennis transfer station, and we ended up 2 locker rooms.
Okay.
Because you had to provide one for each.
I think that's really a plan.
I mean, this could be reduced, doesn't have to be that big, to your point. I mean, if you're only anticipating operation wise, 2 to 3 people, you could just make a smaller, you could break the space and make it, 2 bathrooms and 2 smaller locker rooms.
That's true. Yeah. I was gonna say.
Okay,
Yeah, so I will get, I guess, the specific code confirmed. But yeah, I do believe that there has been some changes made to the plumbing code relative to like the toilet rooms that are required. So we can get back to you on that. And if it needs to be bigger, or we can cut it in half, that's totally doable. Okay. Any other questions on that before I move on to the treatment plant processes? Okay. So this is basically a quick overview of the facility process, and then we'll get into some of the details. Just not knowing everyone's familiarity in the room, we'll just go through it, really quick. Obviously, collection system, I think we're all good with that. It's going to collect sanitary sewage from homes and businesses. Lucky in this area, there's not a lot of industrial sewage, or basically none that would be coming in. So it's all domestic sewage that would be entering this treatment plant. So moving on to preliminary treatment. So this is where the screenings removal and the grit removal happens. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that. And then we have primary / secondary treatment for this proposed treatment plant. This is actually combined in the sequencing batch reactor, or the SBR treatment processes. And I found actually a great little graphic on one of the manufacturer's websites that I'll show about that to explain how that works. Tertiary treatment, it essentially is to enhance the water quality and the filtration aspects to be that final polishing step, essentially. And then after that, it goes through a disinfection process, which will be UV disinfection or UV radiation. So first one to briefly start out with the flows and loads. And again, some of these slides are in the PowerPoint that you have right now. So our design flows are based on the extent of sewered areas that were proposed by the town and Apex for phase 1 and phase 2, those maps that Hillary was talking about. And the treatment equipment needs to cover the range of a minimum day to a maximum day flow. So we need to make sure that the plant will work for times when it's, off peak and it's just starting up and there's not a lot of flow coming in. And it also needs to be able to handle the maximum day flow that you would see, once you've got all of your areas sewered and you're, having a busy summer day. So then the conveyance equipment, such as the pipes, the pumps, the tanks, needs to be able to be sized for the peak instantaneous. So essentially, if you've got, more flow coming down the pipe because everybody flushed the toilet at the same time, your plant needs to be able to hydraulically or have the capacity to handle that, so you're not overtopping tanks or anything like that. And really the reason why I mention that is that obviously we're trying to balance the design of phase 1 versus phase 2. When we had originally looked at this project, a few years ago and gone with an SBR system, it was more of a half of the flow would be in phase 1 and half would be in phase 2. So we were thinking 2 SBR tanks for phase 1 and 2 for phase 2 that we would build later. However, with the slightly adjusted phase 1 and phase 2 that was completed last year, we're looking at more of 2/3 in phase 1 and 1/3 in phase 2. So that kind of made us look at some of the concrete structures and things a little bit more differently. So you'll see that there is 1 extra SBR tank that we're going to use as an equalization tank right now. And there's some areas where we have the ability to add additional blowers or additional pumps when phase 2 is installed. So this is what we're focusing on for phase 1, our average annual daily flows, our max month, mid-month, max day, midday, and peak instantaneous. So this is what we're mainly focused on with the treatment processes for phase 1. However, as I mentioned, we do want to consider, since some of the tanks are including phase 2, we need to consider this phase 2 peak instantaneous flow. So just something to think about as we explain the design. So this is really small. I've got things that are larger in the next few slides, but this is our general process flow diagram that you'll have in front of you. And again, as I went through in the first slide for the treatment process, we have our preliminary treatment, our secondary treatment, our tertiary treatment in UV, and our groundwater recharge. And then kind of similar, but on the outskirts is some of our disposal of materials and sludge. So for preliminary treatment, we will in phase 1 be installing a mechanical bar screen. So that will automatically pick up all the rags and other screening items that need to be taken out of the flow to protect the downstream pipes and equipment. And from there, it will go through a grit removal system, which is a vortex grit removal system, and I'll show a picture on the next page. And that one will allow the heavier sand and gravel to drop out and also be taken to most likely a landfill. And then from there, as we were talking, as Ziad and I were talking, it will be pumped up into the secondary treatment process.
Can I ask a question right here?
Yeah. Yep.
So I read about the grit removal and the sludge. And so how many pounds of solids are we going to be trucking off site? Give me, say day, month, give me a number.
Yeah. So say that again.
So whether it's a day or a month, what are we talking, what do you think we're gonna be trucking off to a landfill?
And that's gonna be depend on the time of year
determined.
too, right? Because
Right,
Based on the flow coming into the.
yeah, so
Sorry.
for, I don't know, for 100,000 gallons of flow, I guess.
Okay.
How much-
Yeah. So I guess I think I've heard everyone was kind of talking at once. So if I missed it, let me know. But for the sludge, so when I talked about solids handling, that the sludge comes off the aerobic digesters, and that
Yeah.
will be in the beginning of phase one. That should be like a sludge hauling tank. So think of like maybe like a septic hauler. That'll be 2 to 3 times a week that sludge will need to be hauled off site. And then at full build out for phase two, it'll be approximately 1 truck a day. So seven days a week that sludge truck will come in and bring it. And that's some of the things that we're looking at right now, what other facilities are doing, from land application to, sending it to, I believe there's a couple of incinerators in the area as well. So that's how the sludge is handled. And then for this process, the screenings and grit,
Yeah,
and we're actually working on the calculations for an actual weight, but for a facility this size, and compared to some of the other plants on the Cape, you might get like a bag of screenings or grit, like let's just say like a big garbage bag, on, a given week. So most likely it would just be, take out the bag, throw it out. I would add that this process, what we're anticipating right now. So here's the screens, which you can't really see, but basically, down here is where the rake would come up with the screenings. You can see there's basically a screw conveyor back here, which leads into what they call a washer compactor. So this takes all of the, I'll say like the remaining toilet paper or wipes, that they say are flushable and they aren't really flushable. They end up in your screenings. It'll take all that and compact it and then wash the organics out and put it back into the system so the later treatment processes can treat it. So you'll have less odors when you're bringing that over to the landfill. So that's a washer compactor. So that's the same thing here. This is the screening enclosure. And this is all going to be inside, just so you know. This one it was a good picture on the website that I could show. So this is a similar thing, the screw conveyor right here to a washer compactor. And it would be, they actually make like bags, like long bags that kind of look like, where you'd put like straw or hay in, those long bags that they use, but obviously a lot smaller, or it could just go dump into a dumpster. And then similar,
I just had a question about, I was just thinking the kind of questions that could come up in a town meeting. So all this discussion is about the building costs, but you just described operating costs.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, do we have a number on that? I mean, the trucks per day that go out, that's a cost. Do you have to pay the landfill to take it? How does all that work?
yes, so there would be operations and maintenance fees. And I think we did, I'd have to get back to you on numbers that we have right now. I believe that was completed on a prior project. But you're correct. There would be hauling fees from a sludge hauler. There would be tipping fees for, if it's the landfill. I mean, you guys, I don't know, we've asked some questions about how you handle, or how you would handle the wastewater treatment plant working with your transfer station, and how that might look. So that might be, especially for the screenings and grit, again, that usually goes to a landfill. So there might be some opportunities there, but it's really the sludge. So yeah, there's operating costs. So you'd have operations costs for the staff, for routine maintenance. In the beginning, it should just be more like, greasing things up, changing out, pump packing or gaskets, things like that. And then in, years down the line, there'll be equipment that you may have to replace when they run to failure.
Just for, this is just my placeholder. It's not based on anything other than things I've seen over time. But I've been carrying $1.5 million in our planning for operating.
Operating costs per year.
Okay.
at full operation.
I could give you an example, like the town of Plymouth, they have also SBR systems and this 1990, when they built the plant, right? They treat far more and they have like 8 people working. And they just went contract ops, and I think they pay about $1.1 million per year. And that includes the chemicals, includes all the stuff, and, you know, Plymouth pays for the lights, for the, all the additional stuff. But I mean,
Right.
Lauren, I don't think you anticipate much grit here, right? Especially when you have a brand new collection system, brand new pipe, there's no II to speak of.
Yeah.
So this should be really minimal at this
But
stage.
sand is good, right?
Yes,
Huh?
they have.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
that-
so I think you know, at this point, as far as grit, you won't get much. It's if there's maybe a joint that's broken, you know, that's where you'll start to see some of that sand you know, infiltrating into the sewer pipe. But otherwise, you know, the grit shouldn't be that bad. I mean, at a much larger plant that I worked at, and um they had a somewhat combined system, so they were getting stormwater in there too. You know, they would come up with maybe like a big garbage can full a week. So I'm anticipating a little bit less. We've actually been we've got a spreadsheet that we're working on. We're getting information from some of the other municipalities in the area to understand what they're seeing for grit, because you know there's a lot of go bys in you know, in our textbooks, but you know, not every place is the Cape where everywhere there's sand. So we're trying to get some real world experience to back up some of our calculations. But yeah, we're not, from what we've heard from others so far, there's not going to be a lot of screenings of grit.
I thought it read down to they get coffee grounds out with this thing.
What the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, coffee grounds. Yeah, like you'll you'll end up seeing a lot of corn and things. It's interesting. So
Drugs.
Oops.
so I think we went over the screens and the washer compactor. So this is a vortex grit removal system. There are some cool, I was going to try to maybe do some videos, but there are some cool videos online. So essentially the flow comes in here, and the vortex actually allows the more dense grit to fall out into this hopper down here, and it gets pumped out and over to a grit classifier, which also washes the grit. So what this does is, as it goes through, it washes the grit to wash off the organics, so that can get, again, treated in the process, in the biological process, and then drops out into, you know, this one is just looks like a little roll-off dumpster. So that's some of the things we're working out is, you know, what type of dumpster is going to work well with the town, and if they have any specific garbage trucks that they use, we'll, you know, try to accommodate that as much as possible. But there's lots of options that we can use to accommodate the system and how it will be disposed. Any more questions on that? Okay, I know it's getting 4:30. I hopefully won't take up the next half hour. So next is our generally secondary treatment process, but really an SBR system does have sedimentation in it as well. So if you look on the process flow diagram, we have the flow being pumped up to our pre-equalization tank, which is actually the third SBR basin for the future, but we'll have an added benefit right now of being able to accommodate differing flows as the treatment plant and everything from the collection system comes online. So we have our 2 sequencing batch reactor tanks. We do have some chemical feed for help in settling out some of the solids. And from there, we have some of the sludge pumped to the aerobic digesters, and then the rest of the sludge heads off to a post-equalization tank, which I'll show next. So I found this visual explanation of what an SBR system does, in case you're not aware. So essentially, you put sludge into a activated sludge process. So in here is essentially all these bugs that eat the organic material in the sludge. And when you turn on the blowers, they you need to have oxygen in order to consume the bugs, or the bugs to consume the organics. Essentially, they use that as fuel. And then when you want the system to go through its cycle and allow the sludge to settle out, that's what they're calling this like clarification. So you're allowing your sludge to settle out. And when that happens, you end up removing the effluent flow. So the clarified water at the top goes through the rest of the treatment process. And then the waste sludge at the bottom will get pumped out to the aerobic digesters. So that's a really quick and dirty way of explaining it. But essentially, I guess the other thing I want to mention is you do have some chemical addition in here, which is another operations cost to be able to settle out these solids more efficiently and quickly. And this runs in a batch system. So you can have one tank going through its process and one tank filling during phase 1. And then for phase 2, you'll have 3 to work with.
And how long does a batch take to process?
I want to say it's about 3 or 4 hours, but there is some flexibility with that.
And then it goes to those are the same digesters, those big things I see at Deer Island?
No. So yeah, so these are much different. So these are actually, those are probably what you're saying is are anaerobic digesters. These are aerobic digesters. So with oxygen, aerobic. So these digesters are actually right here. So what I was kind of explaining, so this was our headworks room where we had the screening and grit, and then it would get pumped up into these SBR tanks. So here's our like I said, here's what we're calling our pre-equalization basin to have this extra tank for phase 2, and then also to be able to use it as kind of a swing basin right now to help with flows that are coming into the plant. And then that would go over into your main 2 SBR tanks. Again, they can fill and go through the process. And then the sludge gets pumped into these 2 aerobic digesters. And they would have most likely a fiberglass cover on them that would be connected to the odor control system. And once this SBR tank goes through its process, it will go to the post-EQ tank and then gets pumped up into the filter building. So this building was actually kind of maybe turned around if we were looking at the plan. So these tanks would be, I don't want to say open because we might be covering them for odor control, but this would be like an actual building up here. And then this backside would be the tanks. And we need to have an area for like the sludge truck. They would come and take the sludge from this area right here. And this process equipment room will be having blowers with space for additional blowers for phase 2, as well as some of the chemical equipment that we'll need.
Is there anything in the process stream on sludge dewatering, Lauren?
Anything on the process stream on sludge dewatering?
Like even reduce the water content further, or just as it comes from the tanks?
Yeah, so at this point, it's just coming from the tanks. I think we're expecting a percent solids of like 1%. We're not planning on doing any dewatering at this plant. And I think that's pretty typical for a lot of the smaller plants from what I understand on the Cape. So, yeah, I think that was maybe a decision that was made before I got involved. Any questions on that? I'll try to keep going. Okay. So tertiary treatment. So we talked a little bit about that. So where it went, so I guess on that previous page, our post-EQ tank on the drawing, that's right here. And from that point, it'll get pumped up into our cloth media disc filters for tertiary treatment. And essentially what these do are filter out some of the remaining, I guess I'll say suspended solids and other constituents of the wastewater so that the plant can meet its effluent limits. We're also looking into, as I mentioned before, we might have some intermediate pumping to be able to get through an activated carbon system for the removal of carbon. But we're still working on a few of the details here. The plant is by itself, the SBR plant is expected to meet some of the permit limits. But to make sure that happens, these extra polishing steps are something that are used. And carbon actually has the ability to, take out some other constituents like PFAS. That's what they use on drinking water side, is GAC systems, or the granular activated carbon. We'll have a plant water system that will be able to provide some of the water for the certain processes, so that you won't have to, use your water, water that you're just pumping. We'll be able to reuse some of that on the site for areas where we don't need potable. And then we have our UV disinfection system. And so I guess to get in some pictures of that to make that a little easier. So these are the tertiary filters. The Aquadis filters is one of the brands. There's a few others that are available as well. So this tank would be in that filter building that's next to the admin building, and we'll have, I believe it's 7 of these filter discs in the tank, or I believe there's 2 tanks. And then for phase 2, we just add a few more filters on to be able to accommodate the flow. So essentially, the water flows into this material, and the water that passes through it obviously has TSS, or total suspended solids, and other turbidity removed, and will flow into a center pipe that goes to the next process. So it's kind of like a soft material. It's kind of neat. Yes. Any questions on that?
I just had a
I
quick
guess-
question on the prior screen.
Yep.
The carbon unit, can you add to that in the future if need be? Will there be enough room to increase the size of that?
I want to say yes. Are you saying for like future?
Yeah, I'm just
parameters?
thinking of, future requirements that might come down where we know carbon is one of the solutions. Would it be,
Yeah. So right now, I mean, so we're looking at a couple different options, and it does take up a good amount of real estate, but we could allow for additional space in the building to be able to accommodate that in the future, like leave a little extra.
I think it would make sense.
Yeah. I want to say, don't quote me, but I think the tanks they are not short, and they're not small. They're, and I can't remember how many we need. Again, I think we're looking at 2 different options. The one option we wouldn't necessarily need to pump, but the other option that's a little bit more I guess condensed as far as a footprint, we would have to pump into. But yeah, let me
Just thinking about the future.
Right? No. Might as well do it now.
Based on Hillary's question, do you normally design a certain percentage increase for future regs that come through?
In use of vessels, I would imagine, right?
So right now there's not actually PFAS regulations that we are able to design to. And there's some debate on, whether you go after the wastewater treatment plants, that it's actually like a pass through, or if you go after some of the municipalities that might have industrial users, a significant industrial users, SIUs or CIUs, that might actually be putting PFAS in the water. Unfortunately, PFAS is ubiquitous. It's everywhere right now. Apparently it's in our blood even. So, we wouldn't necessarily have the data right now to be able to design for like a future potential limit.
So I guess, Lauren, the activated carbon, those are vessels, right? Not open tanks, or are they open tanks?
They're not open tanks. It's like a carbon vessel.
So maybe if you put like 2 in parallel, if the space allows, if the footprint is available, maybe that's what Steve probably was asking, right?
So this
Yeah.
might be a dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. So where in the process does most of the nitrogen get extracted from the?
That is done in the SBR tanks.
And do we get it all out? Do we get?
So I
75?
believe we're working to a nitrogen limit of 3. I want to say 3 milligrams per liter. Hillary's nodding.
Your report said as much, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, I guess I think I was going through some of the pictures. So those are our filters. And then we have, I think for the 30% design, I kind of just showed these contained units, but there really are a bunch of different options for UV disinfection. I'm anticipating it's for our system, it's going to be one of these. So this is just one brand out of many. Again, just trying to show some pictures for some clarity. Some of the larger facilities, they have the ability to have a larger channel. That might be in one of the process buildings. There's the potential for the lamps, the UV lamps to be vertical. Oh, I guess just to back up for those who don't know. So UV is a disinfection process that inactivates viruses and pathogens from replicating or infecting. So in theory, the bug or whatever, it's still in there, but it's just inactivated as opposed to chlorine disinfection or some other chemicals that are used. So this is a potential, way of installing it. The lamps are put in a more vertical or a, angled fashion. There's these UV, Trojan UVs that you could stick in these as well, a number of banks with a horizontal lamp. Or you can have a smaller unit similar to this, but a little bit smaller unit in a channel, like a more of a steel open channel. And based on the size of this treatment plant, we might be looking at something more like this or a closed vessel system. So our team is finalizing that design. Any questions on disinfection? I think we're almost to the end. Okay. So last, after disinfection, it will go to our effluent distribution box and over to the recharge beds. So if you remember from the initial site plan, we've got 5 recharge beds that are of the same size and then one that's a little bit smaller just to make as much use of the available land as possible to get our treatment in there. So there was a lot of work that went into the design and eventually the permitting of the effluent sand beds. So that's a hydrogeo report that we are almost finalized. And I know that the town reps, so Rich and Jackie and Hillary have seen a lot of our progress on that as we went through some of those iterations of the model. But this basically, the hydrogeo report and the permitting goes and shows how much this particular land area can accept for wastewater recharge. We had our test pits and perk tests completed, I want to say last month, so the middle of last month, and the DEP rep came out and he was very happy with the soils that he saw. So we're on a good path there. So that's some of the next items that will be coming down the pike to the group. And I think.
So there was a number that we were trying to hit per day.
Yes, it's
and
5.
Go higher than that.
Oh,
So go ahead, Lauren. So those.
okay.
Those
I thought Hillary was raising her hand.
Those 6 beds will cover the amount of effluent we need for both phase 1 and phase 2 on a daily. I'm not getting the right word.
Yeah, so what the DEC or what the DEP, Mass DEP looks for is 5 gallons per day per square foot.
Right. And we thought we could go to 9, was it?
Yeah, so what we're anticipating, so we did a bunch of different modeling and we've got a wetland specialist. So there's one wetland in the area that has the potential to be affected by the recharge beds. And we're figuring out what effect a higher mounding of groundwater would have on that wetland. So right now the plan is to go so we can kind of streamline the process and not delay anything, going for that 5 gallons per day per square foot for to cover phase 1. And then we anticipate, based on the perk test that we saw, being able to accommodate more than that. And that would be a later essentially permit modification and negotiation with DEP. But they don't like to just automatically give you, a higher limit. We've had success with other municipalities on the Cape of going, I think, up to at least 9, and I think one even was up to 30. So that's how we're addressing this. And then that was maybe some of the discussions that we had of the parcel that Children's Place is on, having some additional area for recharge beds, but that would be kind of like the last resort.
But if we went up higher than 5, we wouldn't go to Children's Place. So.
Well, it all depends on how much flow coming into this. Just to follow up, Lauren, based on the footprint that you show on the site civil drawings, these beds are based on 5 gallons per day per square foot, correct?
Yes. Yeah, let me check on that too, because I think, yeah, but they're based on 5 gallons per day per square foot.
I think they go on an issue, and are you going to cover in the hydrogeo report? Is there any talk or any discussion about future phasing?
So in the hydrogeo report, we're only going for phase 1. So we haven't talked about phase 2. We did talk briefly about that in the scope of work, so that, when, down the line, if it's 10 years down the line, that would have been included in the scope of work that was completed last year. We did start mentioning other sites, like I just said, potentially Children's Place. I think in the original scope of work, it even presented the different sites that were looked at for the treatment plant itself.
Right.
So I
guess
think
to answer your question,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I think Fred was asking if the treatment plant currently can accommodate future phase 1 and future phase 2.
700,000 that they're talking about will stay on this area.
That site.
Correct, for this phase, right?
So I believe, I want to check into this, but I believe almost all of phase 1 could go onto the DPW site. I think we are working on getting the final data from the wetland specialist to see how the mounding could affect that one wetland. That's really the
Key factor.
the crux, key factor, critical success factor. So we had gone through a bunch of iterations with the modeling to see how it would affect at different, or how it would be affected at different flows. So the hydrogeo report definitely has that in there. I don't have it memorized, so let me get back to that. But it is designed for 5 gallons per day per square foot and would be the bulk of phase 1. And again, it's going to be a slow fill as the collection system is built out and all the different houses and businesses connect. So you've got time to see how the recharge beds are doing, and similar to other municipalities, ask for additional recharge flow.
Right, but your hydrogeo report is only for phase 1.
Correct.
So when are we gonna do the hydrogeo report for phase 2? I mean, if we're going for the money for the whole thing, I guess what I'm getting at, I don't want to Trojan horse here. We model it for this much, and then, oh, by the way, we have to pipe over to Children's Place and build out that place, right?
Well, but we've always had phase 2 as a separate cost.
The 170 million doesn't include phase 2?
No,
I
it
thought we
never
were
did.
building this for phase 2.
No, we're building it for phase 1.
Only.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
But there's space, when she talks about for when we bring on phase two, we'll
Yeah.
add another tank, there's space.
To do
Right.
it,
To
but it's
do
not
it.
in the cost.
But it's not
Right.
in the cost.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Lauren,
Yeah,
do you have-
so
And I think we're gonna be able to convince DEP over time, once we see the perking, that we can fit it all on
You
this
can get
site.
more capacity out of it.
Yeah.
As long as that. Okay,
Lauren, do you know how many square feet are in the recharge beds?
I can almost calculate in a very close number really quickly here. 120 times 120 times 5 plus 70 times 70.
so
That's
You could
not
put a
right.
house- Oh, Jack, you have-
It's right here, it's 13.
Thank you.
I'm not taking it home.
I know, because they're like 120 by 120. Oh, there we go. Times 5 equals plus, let's say 75 times 75. It's about close to 80,000 square feet. Give or take. I was doing rough numbers quickly from what I remember. Any questions on that? This is my last slide, and then any other further questions we can go over. And I honestly, I think we've pretty much talked about all this. So this was really just, usually a lot of times people separate the liquid process from the solids handling or biosolids or sludge process. So I kind of put this last. So we had our waste activated sludge pumps that came off the SBR tanks, and that get pumped into these aerobic digester tanks. As you know, I mentioned it was those smaller tanks, so not the big ones you see on Deer Island. And then there's these are aerobic, so with oxygen, and there's blowers that also feed air into these to help the bugs do their thing. And this actually had another line to it. So this is what would be hauled off by a sludge hauler, either to incinerator or land application, or what's agreed upon. And that's all I had.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I guess any questions, anything I didn't answer? I know we're getting close to 5, so I don't want to take too much time up.
I guess I'll be a pain in the butt a little bit. So 80,000 square feet times 5 gallons per square foot is 400,000 gallons per day.
And you have to separate.
And isn't phase one 750 or so?
So, okay, so that's where some of the different, let me,
It's a long.
Or is
So
it that 9
Mhm.
gallons per day? Usually
Separate
it's
the
coming.
numbers, guy.
That depends on their willingness to.
I think it was a percentage of the max daily flow.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not
Yeah.
gonna-
sorry,
But you
I've
only
lost
use
I've lost my PowerPoint. 1 second.
the sequential process here. Fill one bed,
These tanks.
then
It's
you come back.
built on the percentage. of
So
Flow.
when we're talking about the what the recharge beds need to be sized for, it is I forget who just said it, 80% of max day. So you're not actually sizing the beds for, what was it, 754, like a peak instantaneous. You're sizing the treatment that will be conducted by the beds for 80% of max day. But typically you're going to see, like a max month number, or, average daily flow number, which is a little less. So that's why there's a lot of different calculations that, depending on the process that you're looking at it, they use different flow conditions to be able to size the process.
Well, that's why we got you to figure all that out, but I'm just,
Right.
on a high level, so when people ask.
Right.
But so based on the total phase 1 and 2 of 640 at 80% of that, that would mean, to accomplish that, we need 6.5 gallons per day per square foot per day. So
That
it
sounds,
seems
yeah.
likely
Yeah,
doable.
that's doable.
Just don't tell the DP that calculation.
No, they know, that's why we're
Yeah.
gonna have these little testing
And
things,
they know all these numbers too.
test wells. And
mean, this is a conservative number, like Lauren said, the 5 gallons per day per square foot. Oftentimes in sand, and especially when you have separation in groundwater, water just kind of go into the ground like pretty quick.
These people.
Right.
DEP people don't go to the beach very much.
So yeah, I mean, part of this was based on, the accelerated, kind of accelerated schedule. We were trying to make things as, I don't want to say easy, but as standard as possible, so they wouldn't have to go into further reviews. So I think the schedule that I had shown way back when had what they post for a standard schedule and what they post for I guess I'd say like a mandatory review schedule. So if it's something out of the ordinary, they automatically kick you into like a longer review schedule. So we were trying to, work with what we had and, stick on that quicker schedule. So, yeah. And I guess from a design perspective, we are still trying to get our geotech report done. We're waiting on soil borings from the soil boring contractor. And, I think, once we have an understanding of what we're doing, I know it's, as Jackie mentioned, or Jackie Tupper mentioned, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Friday we're like, oh, we're not submitting. And today we're like, okay, well, maybe just, there's things that we need to know as to whether it's USDA or SRF to be able to put together the right specifications and make sure it's following the right requirements. It sounds like AIS and BABA is required for both. Jackie Tupper and I talked about that. And, it's just a matter of, figuring out what we need to follow. So that's all I have, unless somebody has more questions.
Has anybody started looking at the cost evaluation of the 30% design?
So we will be, I guess we'll have to let me know when we need to have that, if we need that for town meeting. We had somewhat postponed that, kind of with the uncertainty going on right now. Also with the idea of putting in lead design, which will increase the cost some as well. So we wanted to have a few more things ironed out before we do have a cost from, obviously from way back when, but we'll need to know when that would be necessary.
Yeah,
To have.
Jackie, solar panels, they come from China.
Well, you're doing a peer review right now, correct?
Correct.
And then after that, you'll be doing a value engineering session?
Yeah.
Yep.
And don't you need a cost evaluation before you do a value engineering session? So I'm just asking the question, what's the schedule on that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have to have a cost estimate of 30%. That's just your base, right? With a high contingency. And then as the design progresses a little bit further, value engineering usually done a little bit further down the line, somewhere between 30 and 60%, right? If anything needs to change, it'll change at that time. But because of the time constraint and town meeting right now, we may have to, the only thing we could go by is a 30% with a high contingency. Especially at this stage. I mean, right now, we need to provide comments back to Lauren and GHD by the 21st. So we're working on this, and then, if this is going to town meeting and it cannot be May, right? Because that's closed, right?
Cannot be May.
Cannot be May. So most likely,
Okay.
if it's going in June,
7
maybe
weeks from now.
7, yeah. So
Or
maybe at the
7
end of
weeks
this month,
from now.
we'll have to come up with a 30% cost estimate.
And obviously, if we're going into a June town meeting, we need that cost estimate because Rich has gotta, we have to sell something,
Yeah, you have to have the numbers to
get the number.
prove out.
So there was some publications just came out this past week about the impacts of the tariffs.
Yes, I
On
was gonna ask you.
things, and they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Because of opinions, and of
Yeah.
course, everybody has their
Well,
own.
the
opinion.
amounts of the tariffs change all the time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have a
And
sense,
they're gonna go up and down.
Do you have-
Yo-yo in the next couple of weeks.
do you have a sense of, from obviously other facilities, sort of percentages of imported components and the countries or?
Do you
Are you
have?
looking-
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess my experience with that was when ERA funds were out. There was definitely, it was definitely difficult for some of these items that had to be, I think now the BABA requirements like 55% made in America or, you know, transformed in America. So there's definitely some equipment that is only bought, you can only get from overseas. I do know that we are working on waivers that you have to bring up all the way to the EPA for certain pieces of equipment, just because for wastewater, there's definitely a few things that, you know, you're just not going to find. You know, I don't have a percentage necessarily. I mean, luckily there is a lot of, you'll be able to find some domestically sourced blowers. You know, there's a lot of concrete here, piping. So, you know, usually that just ends in, I want to say delays because you're, you know, there's so many people trying to get on the list to get, you know, ductile iron pipe or whatever. So it's more of a time factor. But and there's sometimes there's some valves that can be tough to get, but I think
I mean, yeah, most of your pumps probably gonna have to come from overseas, either Sweden, Germany, the grid system, the screens, usually those are hardly ever from here. If we look at a structural steel building, structural steel that comes from Canada or from Mexico, right? So.
A
Yeah.
lot of the components, what that said, solar panels.
That's why it's called an estimate.
right.
With a high contingency.
Well, I thought it was, I'm ironically, like funny, that DEP warned us. They were like, okay, and you need to tell your engineers, you know, to plan for, and I'm like, oh my God, can you plan? You can't even tell us how much money you're gonna have next year, let alone.
Nice.
Oh man.
I mean, I didn't, but it's
You
like,
could've.
come on.
You know what the worst part of all of this, that'll be the gouging too, right? I mean.
Yes.
All.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Get in
I
line.
mean, I think that's what happened during COVID and
I was
after
gonna say COVID
COVID, it's like,
masks times 10.
Right.
Yeah. you know, you couldn't tell at the end of that what was
No.
a true.
No.
But they're doing an estimate. I mean, a professional estimator will evaluate that. He'll just say a certain percentage
Yeah.
equipment's gonna be coming from overseas. I'm gonna assume a 10% tariff because that's maybe where it's gonna shake out. I mean, he will describe in his estimate how he evaluated and then came up with his numbers, and it'd be up to us to challenge him if we disagree. But I mean, that's the professional engineer does.
The tricky thing is the tariff, this is all known, even to the estimators, right? So it's gonna be a guess game until you have a baseline you could go by, right?
Yeah.
And you won't have a baseline until you have gone through a couple of iterations of this thing and see what the impacts are gonna be.
And we're also not building anything now, we're building something a year from now,
Right,
you know, or more.
Right.
And so we fall into that trap too, like I thought when GHD first mentioned, I think 160 million, I think Jeff mentioned that at a public meeting, I had not heard that number before. You can see it on the select board meeting, I was like, we're not talking about 160 million. It's just like, no. And here we are at 170,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I know we had been looking at you know, the effects of BABA on some of the pricing. So we do have some, I guess I'll say guidance on contingencies for that. But yeah, I think, you know, seeing what happens in the next few weeks, usually there's some like webinars or things that come out or people provide on how this is going to affect the wastewater equipment and industry.
But working backwards, you're gonna probably have a late June town meeting if it goes. You're gonna need to publish information 4 weeks in advance. So you're looking third week of May, you kind of need some good solid numbers, which means it's gotta be evaluated and reviewed by people. So a couple weeks before that, so you're looking second week of May, you kind of need some numbers.
Yeah, we need to jump on this pretty quick, and I think just to kind of back up a little bit, I mean, first, I guess the confirmation, right? From DEP, and then we're gonna have to
Then you're gonna decide whether you're gonna go for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really do need to do that by next week, or else it's gonna be
Yeah,
like
we'll
this.
all make it, and
Mm-hmm.
then even then we're gonna be jammed.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you specify equipment, I mean, obviously you're going for what you need, good stuff and everything else, and mostly it tends to be overseas, probably. Is there any domestic things that you can open up the specs to a little bit more, or you kind of tied into them?
I mean, I don't know
Um,
what you're designing around, right? You're designing around aquarobics?
Yeah, so we're designing around aqua aerobics. Based on SRF requirements, we have to have 2 other or equals to go along with that. So we'll have to have 3. You know, if there is something I mean, the aqua aerobics package is actually, you know, pretty big for what they provide, whether it's blowers or, you know, the aeration equipment. But any of that equipment will need to have 3 manufacturers. And, you know, I don't want to necessarily open up the specs to something that's not quality and won't last the town like it should. But, you know, if there is something that's domestic that, you know, it seems like a slam dunk, yes, we'll definitely list it as an or equal.
Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Just one quick question. Why were there 3 options as far as where the info comes into the site? I saw that in the drawings. Is there a reason for that?
Oh, so that was, we wanted to lock in the elevation of the SBR structure, and Jackie Tupper and her team were still looking at some of the options for the collection system. So we just wanted to, you know, give some options of a terminal manhole location that would work for the location of the or the elevation of the SBR building.
Nice discussion purposes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Problem is, it opens up a big wide swath right where we don't want a big wide swath, in my estimation.
With one of the options.
Yeah, right across the street from the neighborhood that hates us.
And the second option was a little further left of that.
Mhm.
Seemed to be, I think that's where we settled tentatively. Was our can they look?
Yeah, I think it's either the driveway or
Because it didn't have as much elevation change, so it was easier to excavate and implement, but also preserved the road.
The whole
And
driveway.
so you didn't have to dig up the road, and you don't have to worry about if you ever have to relocate the DPW without impacting that main. So it was all to the left, or all to the right of the DPW site, so it keeps it all in, it's kind of a separate wastewater facility site.
More toward the transfer station.
Yeah.
yeah, basically we wanted to have a few options just in case there was the ability, you know, like, and Jackie can probably speak better to this, but you know, we don't want to have to put in a pump station in unnecessarily.
So all 3 of those options are, you wouldn't need a pump station.
I'll leave that up to Jackie, but we wouldn't need to. We wouldn't need to do influent pumping right away if they were at those elevations.
Gotcha.
We ready?
Good.
All right.
I'm not sure if it's for this, I mean, for people on the, where in all of this, because you're gonna get asked this at whatever town meeting that gets socialized. Where does tea time figure in all of this?
It's on the route,
In terms of what phase it is?
phase
Or what's
one.
one? Okay, I'm just, because
Yeah.
that's gonna come up. As a,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then I guess my second question is or just comment for you, and you're kind of figuring things out as you socialize. You've got initial sewer hookups, you've got what, quarterly or annual sewer fees, whatever that is on the plus side, and then you've got the operating side. So have you, maybe you're to be checking with other towns to see what kind of like numbers, how they shake out, do they equal? I'm just thinking about other things you might get asked, or you will
Yeah.
get asked.
And we've also, Rich has set up the wastewater stabilization fund, which we've contributed to 3 years.
Yeah, we honestly, I'd like to have about double what we have. We have enough now to start up the plant probably, because that takes at least a couple of years to ramp up, if
Right.
not longer.
Yeah, yeah.
So that operation will need to be subsidized. And I'd like to have enough in there maybe to smooth out the debt service as it comes on board too. But we just don't have it yet, so.
And what kind of lead time, you know, I know it's kind of a phased process in Orleans where people are, a lot of the businesses are hooking up.
Mm.
What is that? I mean, there's gonna be a hard date at some point, but what is that period?
It's a
Usually.
the huge problem has been, they give you a year, right? They give you a year to hook up if
Who
you're the town
Oh.
and the client, the resident, right? But then they can't find contractors,
Right.
everyone's so busy doing
It's
stuff.
backup.
So
So
it does
is
take
that what
a long
Orleans has
time.
done? I mean, it seems like it's more than a year since they put the system in.
Yeah, but they're on like phase
This is phase 5, I think.
5
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, but the people that are hooking up, you know, along Route 28 there, near where the Stop and Shop is and all of that,
That's like phase 1.
that's phase 1.
I was involved in a property in phase 1, Fred, in Orleans, and the first year came and went, and then they offered a 1-year extension,
Oh, okay.
and we were one of the few projects that got, well, I guess the second year, it ended March 1st or sometime last month. And I'm sure all the properties aren't hooked up yet. The engineers are a big roadblock too, you know, they get just jammed up with these applications. And it can be the same engineers that people in Orleans are trying to get the work that our guys are gonna be trying to get.
Right, like you have
Of course.
500 properties in
Of
Orleans,
course.
300 in Eastham, 200, yeah.
But I mean, you need the flow, but you can't get.
Exactly.
The hookups. you
So
know,
that's
the
why
income.
Rich is.
That's why we need this
concerned.
The
stabilization.
contingency, yeah, you have to be able to have, yeah.
Yeah, I wanna have, you know, it's $1.5 million. You know, it might not be $1.5 million fully for all the 3 years, but just for planning purposes and being conservative.
To be
You know, that means we
conservative,
need 4.5 in the stabilization fund for 3 years of
to cover
operations.
the inevitable delays.
Yes,
So they're out 3 years, Peter, over there?
So I bet there'll be 3 years before everybody in phase 1 is hooked up. Yeah, from when people could hook up, to when they
Right.
actually got hooked up.
Get hooked up.
but
And a lot of
I
their
think that
phase 1
Main
is
Street,
industrial, is commercial stuff that gets the flow you're looking for, right?
That's the heavy fees come
so
from that,
that's
right?
why we
No, I
want.
mean, I wouldn't say that. You got a lot of roads down Schoolhouse Road, that's all residential. So then you got a main going down Route 6, so you're picking up the hotels and, you know,
Restaurants,
Bracket Road. But
park service.
park, yeah.
Bathrooms, yeah.
But that's gonna be the challenge, I mean, if you do the math and it's $1.5 million, if that's the operating cost. Across, you know, 650 or so users. On average, that's not a sustainable, that's not an affordable rate that we can charge.
Yeah.
So are we gonna pick up a bunch from the Sheridan and restaurants and? You know, I'm sure we'll pick up more, but not enough to offset that to be an attractive rate, so I would like you to keep that in your minds, because at some point as this group, we're gonna have to talk about that. You know, what degree of subsidy are we willing to do on the tax rate, if any?
Thank you.
I mean, Wellfleet is still subsidizing their water system 20 some odd years into it,
Wow.
so. Cause they made it too small.
Those are philosophical discussions, you kind of have to have up front. So, you know, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, people will, you know, complain or not, you know, it's based on the decisions
I
we're
won't
talking
be
about
here.
now.
That's your Trojan horse. That's your Trojan.
Well, we can
horse.
still, you know, blame you, Fred.
That's fine.
We'll find
You
somebody.
won't mind.
My kids will be living at the house.
All right,
Thank you.
thank
Well-
you.
Oh, I
Oh,
have
boy.
a question. I have a question. I'm not sure. I didn't read the agenda carefully, but my question was about we got the 30% on the, treatment plant, but are we 30% designed on the collection system, or what's the plan on that status?
Yeah, so I think a quick update on that. I don't know what I would say the percent is, but we have it all, I think 120 sheets in CAD designed. I think we have the maps that we sent from the other meetings. So now we're kind of in that holding pattern of our subs, so they're all under contract. We've kind of got them all going. It's just a matter of which day. I know we're kind of coordinating with the police and things like that. The surveyor was looking at next week. But it's also like a staging phase, so we'll have the utility mark out sub that's doing, that will have to go before the borings to clear those for not, not hitting any utilities, but then we also have a handful of the roads that they're marking out the entirety of the road. Especially if we marked out the, or flagged the ones where we came across on the water project. It's private electric, so DigSafe won't mark it out, so we have the marking company do that. But we're also lining it up with the surveyor, so the surveyor can pick up the boring marks that we make and then also pick up the flags from the utility mark out. So we have that all lined up, and then we haven't finalized the pump station locations yet, but we had a few that we were looking back and forth on. I think on a previous map, we were looking at the Historical Society, but we're switching that probably to the elementary school. So
And when's that work gonna happen roughly, do you think? I know you don't know
I'm
the day,
hoping
but,
next week. They keep changing,
but, so
but-
April.
Mhm.
And I actually just brought up a good point for our group here. So, we have an article at town meeting, for, eminent domain taking, the two Dilgizzi condos, which will, we also own 50% of the, yeah, one of the other, two of the four condos we own. We're taking the other two from Dilgizzi, which gives us control of all four condos, but more importantly, the land. And so that's what this is all, part of what all this is about
Pump
is
station.
to locate a pump station
Oh, okay.
and stormwater remediation at that site. So it's a really key and important part because that's one of the most important pump stations, right? Is at the bottom of the elevation for this part of town going down.
Okay,
So that pump station's there to get it to the plant.
but that's a warrant, that's on the, that's on
It's
the
on.
warrant. Got it. Okay.
But assuming that everything's a go as of the end of June, how far behind is the design currently?
For the collection system?
No, I don't think that's the issue. Plant itself.
yeah.
I guess my point is, well, you know, final numbers from going out to bid was gonna be next spring. But is it 3 months behind, so it's gonna be a summer bid out, or do you know?
Oh, no, we can't be behind.
Oh, I thought we were, when we started out.
Oh, we'll need to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, I mean, so for the schedule, like bidding, I didn't bring it up with me, but some of the bidding because of, I think some of you are aware with all the filed sub bids, some of this starts, I want to say towards the end of the year to be able to start getting the contractors pre-qualified, to start getting the bids in for the the subs from the filed sub bids. So, that starts, pretty quickly. So, I mean, GHD's committed to doing everything we can to meet the schedule, whatever it ends up being. But yeah, we're, going as quickly as we can. As we said in the beginning, it was a pretty aggressive schedule. And yeah, we're gonna do our best to meet that.
okay, so the original schedule is on track,
Mhm.
so we're saying, okay. And cost wise on the design phase, are we staying in line at that point too, or? You doing projected cost reports and stuff to see where you are?
On the design?
Yeah.
It's on budget, yeah. I think we're on
Yeah.
budget, right?
Okay,
Yeah, actually, the one thing that I did want to mention is something that we would need to, I guess, present to the town is that our contract only goes through the end of June. Technically, it's for, I guess we left for final design. We left for that separate contract. So I'll work with Hillary and Jackie Tupper on what we need to do there to be at least extend the contract from, like a no cost change order type thing. and get in information. Once we get, final written approval of what we're doing as far as, if it's USDA funding, if we're incorporating lead design, which I believe, probably if SRF is approving us, then we're probably doing that, and solar panels and a few of the things that weren't included in the scope.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you very much.